My name is Deborah Gwynn, 24 years old. I never expected my life to change because of a house yet. The moment I stepped into my late uncle's two-story home with its sun-warmed floors and faint scent of old books, I felt something loosen inside me. He'd always been eccentric, the kind of man who bought things simply because he liked the idea of them, and this house was one of those indulgences. A swimming pool in the front yard, massive windows that reflected the sky, and rooms that echoed, even when I whispered. He'd lived here alone until he passed away at 60 a few months ago. Somehow, inexplicably, he left it to me, the house, and $75,000. I'd moved in just 2 weeks earlier. Half-opened boxes lined the hallways, leaning like tired travelers waiting to be unpacked. Yet even in its half-settled state, the place felt like mine. A fresh start, a milestone. Something worth celebrating with the people who mattered most. Which is why the day after I moved in, I invited both of my parents to come see it. Dad showed up exactly on time, smiling the moment he walked through the front door. "Deborah, this place suits you," he said, spinning slowly in the living room as if trying to take it all in. He always had a way of making me feel grounded, stable. Mom arrived 10 minutes later with her stepdaughter. The girl was 16, all crossed arms and cold stares, standing in the doorway like someone had dragged her here against her will. I hadn't asked Mom to bring her, and while I didn't dislike the kid, she made me uneasy, like she was constantly analyzing me, deciding I wasn't worth her time. But what struck me even more than her presence was my mother's behavior. She used to walk into any room like she owned, the sunlight warm, familiar, effortlessly confident. But that day, she acted like a polite stranger who wasn't sure where to rest her hands. Curt replies, stiff posture, eyes darting around the house as though searching for something she didn't want me to see. She didn't relax even when Dad cracked a joke about the pool. I thought maybe she was uncomfortable because her stepdaughter was with her, but the tension between them didn't feel like embarrassment. It felt deliberate, like they were a pair, now unified, in a way that left no space for me. And that realization sank into my chest with a quiet, unwanted ache. Still, I pushed through the awkwardness, showing them each room with forced enthusiasm. Dad complimented everything, the layout, the lighting, even the view from the upstairs window. Mom nodded, lips pressed thin, offering a week. Yes, it's lovely every so often. The stepdaughter barely spoke. When I mentioned wanting to host Christmas here for the first time, Dad smiled warmly. But Mom and the girl exchanged a silent look that made my stomach tighten. Something was wrong. I felt it then like a small crack forming under my feet. I just didn't know how wide it would eventually split. In the past few years, Mom and I had drifted apart. Ever since she remarried, her world seemed to rotate around her husband and his daughter. She still called occasionally, but usually only when she needed something. I told myself not to take it personally. Grown-ups grow apart, schedules change, priorities shift. But as I watched her sit stiffly on my couch that afternoon, I wondered if I'd been lying to myself. Dad, still single, still steady, had become the parent I saw most. He was the one who came for dinners, who helped me move boxes, who texted me reminders when I forgot to eat. With him, I never had to guess where I stood. With Mom, I wasn't sure anymore. A week after that visit at work, threw something unexpected my way. My boss asked me to attend a meeting 7 hours out of town. He insisted only I could handle the client. It was inconvenient timing. I had a rare collector's edition game arriving that same day, a gift from my boyfriend for our 3rd anniversary, and it was something I absolutely couldn't miss. I'd waited ages for the shipment. Dad couldn't help. He was leaving for a beach trip with friends. My boyfriend couldn't receive it because it was his gift, and my neighbors would rather eat glass than talk to me. None of my friends were free. I was seconds from giving up and leaving a pathetic note on my front door, begging the delivery guy to call me when my phone buzzed. It was my mother. She hardly called anymore unless she needed something, so I waited quietly for her reason. After a moment, she told me she wanted to borrow my house for the weekend to host her book club because her husband would be home the day they planned to meet. She offered to pay for anything I needed for the day, but all she really wanted were the keys. It felt harmless, even convenient. I didn't question it. I just said yes. Maybe part of me wanted the relationship to be easy again, wanted to believe she still thought of me. Maybe part of me wanted her approval more than I admitted. So 2 days later at 1 p.m., I handed her the keys. She squeezed my hand briefly, something almost tender flickering in her eyes. Then the moment vanished, and she left with her stepdaughter trailing behind her. I watched them drive away, a strange flicker of unease curling deep in my stomach. something small, quiet, and unnameable. But I ignored it. I packed my bag, started the engine, and began the long drive out of town, thinking that the weekend would be simple, quiet, and uneventful. I had no idea I was driving straight into a storm that would change everything. The highway stretched out in front of me like an endless ribbon of gray, disappearing into the horizon. I tried to relax, telling myself this trip would be a simple inconvenience followed by a free weekend at a nice hotel. I rolled down the window, letting the cool wind brush against my face, but the uneasy knot in my stomach clung stubbornly to my ribs. I couldn't shake the image of my mother's face when she took the keys, her eyes flicking toward her stepdaughter, the faint tightness around her mouth. It wasn't exactly guilt, but it wasn't comfort either. Something lay beneath her expression, something I couldn't decode. 5 hours into the drive, just as I started imagining the hotel spa and convincing myself I was being paranoid, my boss called. "Bad news," he said. "The client had an allergic reaction. He's in the hospital. Meeting is off." I pulled into a rest stop parking lot and slumped back in my seat. A canceled meeting after driving nearly 5 hours. Perfect. Just perfect. While waiting for my food inside the small roadside diner, a sudden thought whispered through my mind. Check the cameras. I had installed new CCTV in the house the week before. I hadn't tested them yet. And now that my trip had become pointless, I figured I might as well take a look. I opened the app. At first, the screen loaded with lag, the little spinning circle mocking my impatience. Then it clicked into focus, and I froze. Not because I saw a book club meeting in the living room, but because I saw bodies everywhere. Teenagers. Dozens of them. Music lights flashing across the walls. People jumping on my couch. Someone sliding across my hardwood floor on a pillow. Another pouring beer into a potted plant. Every room was overflowing. Kids sprawled across my kitchen counters, lying on my bed, running through hallways, laughing, dancing, drinking. What hit me hardest were the living room walls. Someone had smeared fluorescent paint across them. My breath caught in my throat. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, willing it to make sense, willing this to be someone else's house. But it wasn't. I recognized every corner, every piece of furniture. My mother hadn't borrowed the house for a book club. My mother had given my house to her stepdaughter. For a party, a massive one. A pulse of anger shot through me, hot and dizzying. I was already on my feet, abandoning my food before it even arrived. My hands shook as I jogged to the car. The dread in my chest hardened into a sharp burning point. The drive back wasn't peaceful this time. My thoughts raced faster than the tires spinning beneath me. How could she? Why would she do this? Did she think I wouldn't find out? Did she even care? By the time I reached my neighborhood, it was almost 11 p.m., and I heard the chaos before I even turned onto my street. Music thundered from a block away, so loud it vibrated through my windshield. Cars lined the street, every driveway. Full beer cans rolling along the curb. Teenagers were clustered around my pool, splashing each other, laughing, stumbling. My heart climbed into my throat. This wasn't a party. This was a rager. When I stepped into my yard, a boy I'd never seen before raised his red plastic cup at me. "Sick house," he yelled, grinning drunkenly. I didn't answer. I pushed past him and opened my front door. Heat, noise, the sour smell of sweat and beer, music so loud it rattled my teeth. The floor was sticky. My hallway was packed shoulder to shoulder, a maze of bodies, each one moving in a chaotic rhythm. A group of girls danced on my coffee table, shaking the chandelier. A guy was passed out in my reading nook, drooling onto a comic book I'd left there. No one looked at me. No one cared that the owner of the house had just walked in. Why would they? The place might as well have been a public venue. I shoved my way through the thick crowd, muttering, "Excuse me," then move. Then, eventually just pushing past people because politeness stopped working. Every room looked worse than the last. Then I remembered something: my bedroom. I stormed up the stairs 2 steps at a time, my pulse pounding in my ears. The music quieted slightly as I reached the second floor, but the damage was obvious even here. Beer stains on the carpet, clothes that weren't mine scattered across the hallway. Someone had left a slice of pizza stuck to the wall like modern art. My bedroom door was half open. Inside, the lights were dim and laughter echoed from the corner. My stepdaughter sat on the floor with 2 friends giggling, a cup of beer in hand. My pillow, the one I slept on last night, was propped under her feet like a footrest. She looked right at me, and then she ignored me, turning back to her friends like I was a ghost. Something inside me snapped. I strode in, grabbed her arm, and pulled her to her feet. "Get up," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "Your party is over. Everyone leaves. Now." Her friends shrank back, staring at me with wide, stunned eyes. She scowled. My mom said I could use the house. She told me it was fine. Your mother lied, I shot back. This house is mine, and if you're all not gone in 10 minutes, I'm calling the cops. Every single one of them. That got their attention. A ripple of fear passed through the group. Underage drinking plus cops equals disaster. The house emptied in a slow, chaotic rush. I stood at the door, watching teenagers pour out into the night, some running, some stumbling. All of them suddenly very sober. When the last kid stumbled off the porch and the music finally died, the silence hit me like a physical force. I walked through the house again. Beer bottles everywhere, furniture ruined, carpet soaked, walls defaced, my kitchen counter sticky with God knows what, my pool full of floating cups, my belongings strewn across rooms in ways I couldn't explain. I stood in the center of the living room, frozen breathing in the remnants of a world that had spun out of my control. This wasn't just a party. This was destruction. And the person who allowed it, who orchestrated it, was the one person I never thought would betray me this way. My mother. The silence after the last teenager fled my yard felt heavier than the noise ever did. It clung to my skin thick and suffocating as I stared at the wreckage. My hands trembled, not just from anger, but from something deeper, sharper. Betrayal sits differently in the body when it comes from your own mother. I pulled out my phone, fingers icy, despite the heat in my chest, and hit call. She answered on the second ring. Deborah. Why are you calling so late? Her voice was calm, neutral, as if nothing was happening, as if her daughter hadn't just turned my home into a nightclub. I didn't bother softening my tone. You need to explain right now why there were 100 teenagers in my house. Silence on her end, a beat too long. Then, with a sigh that sounded rehearsed, she replied, Oh, for God's sake, Deborah, don't tell me you're upset about this. I closed my eyes, forcing my voice not to break. Upset, I had to shut down an entire high school party in my house. My bedroom, my furniture, my things. They trashed everything. Well, technically, it was your stepsister's birthday, she said, cool and unbothered. She wanted to celebrate with her friends somewhere nice. Our house is tiny, you know that. I thought you'd be generous. The word generous hit me in the chest like a slap. You lied to me, I said, each word tight. You told me it was for a book club meeting. You said you needed the house just for a few hours. Because I knew you'd say no, she snapped, her voice turning sharp. You never liked her. You've always been cold to her, and frankly, she feels unwelcome around you. I laughed, a humorless, broken sound. I have never been anything but polite to her. She's the one who acts like I'm invisible. That's not how she sees it. Oh, so now I'm the villain. My voice rose without my permission. You let a bunch of underage kids drink in my home. They were blasting music so loud the neighborhood probably shook. They destroyed my things. Do you even care? Stop being dramatic, she said. Teenagers drink. Parties get messy. Nothing happened that can't be cleaned. You have a big house now. It's selfish to act like you can't share it. Selfish. There it was. The same word she'd thrown at me when I was 13 and asked her to pick me up from school instead of spending the evening with her then-boyfriend. The same word she used when I cried on her wedding day because she barely looked at me during the ceremony. It threaded through my memories with a bitter rising sting. I'm not cleaning any of this, I said finally quietly. You and your husband are responsible for this mess. You lied, your stepdaughter lied. You're paying for the cleanup. That's the bare minimum. Her voice turned cold. Absolutely not. You embarrassed her. You humiliated her in front of her entire school. If anyone deserves an apology tonight, it's her. And I will not pay for your tantrum. When she hung up on me, I stared at my screen for several seconds, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. Blocked. Just like that. She'd blocked me. Not even the decency of a final word. Something inside me cracked cleanly, painfully, like a thin piece of glass splitting down the middle. I stood in the middle of my ruined living room and made a decision I wouldn't have made earlier in the night. I called her husband. When he answered, his voice was groggy, confused, then horrified as I told him everything in stark detail. The party, the mess, the underage drinking, his daughter's behavior, my mother's lies. To my surprise, he didn't argue. He didn't defend them. He simply exhaled long and disappointed. I'm so sorry, Deborah, he said softly. I had no idea. I'll transfer the money for cleanup immediately, and I'll talk to both of them. This is unacceptable. A moment later, a payment notification appeared on my phone. I didn't want his apology, not really. I just wanted my mother to care enough to give one herself. But she didn't. The next morning, she called me, not to apologize, but to scream. "How dare you involve my husband?" she yelled, her voice sharp enough to cut flesh. "He grounded my daughter because of you. You made me look like a fool. You went behind my back and—" I interrupted, my voice low, shaking. "You lied to me. You exploited me. You let your daughter destroy my home. You blocked me." "Because I didn't want to listen to more of your narcissistic accusations," she spat. "You're selfish. You always have been. She needed something, and you have enough to share. But no, everything always has to be about you." The words landed with surgical precision. Narcissistic, selfish, always about me. If she'd slapped me, it would have hurt less. "I'm done," I whispered. She didn't hear me or didn't care. She kept yelling until she ran out of breath, then hung up again. This time she didn't block me. She didn't need to. She had already made everything perfectly clear. I stared at the stained floor, the ruined walls, the shattered remains of the night before. But the real destruction wasn't the beer-soaked carpet or the broken furniture. It was the realization that my mother had chosen a version of herself, a younger, shinier reflection over me. And suddenly walking away didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like survival. The house was spotless by the time the cleaning crew finished, but the silence inside it felt different, emptier, heavier. A week had passed, but the weight in my chest hadn't lifted. It pressed on me each morning when I opened my eyes, a quiet reminder that something fundamental between my mother and me had cracked beyond simple repair. I didn't call her. She didn't call me. And for the first time in my life, the absence felt clarifying. My boyfriend noticed before I ever said a word. I was quieter than usual, slower to laugh more easily, startled by small things. One evening, after I pushed food around my plate without eating, he finally asked gently, "Deborah, what happened?" I told him everything. Not the short version, the real version. Every detail I had kept inside like a bruise no one could see. I expected questions, maybe even disbelief. Instead, he didn't interrupt once. He didn't try to dissect it or force explanations. He didn't even try to fix it. He just reached out, took my hand, and held it until my breathing steadied. There was something grounding in his silence, in the way he nodded slowly, as if absorbing each shard of hurt without letting it cut either of us deeper. He didn't tell me to forgive her. He didn't tell me to call her. He just said, "I'm here, whenever you're ready to talk again, or even if you're not." That alone made my throat tighten. A few days later, when Dad returned from his beach trip, I finally gathered the courage to tell him too. He listened with a growing tightness around his jaw, a quiet fury simmering beneath his calm demeanor. "I blocked her," I confessed quietly. I can't do this anymore. Not after everything she said." Dad leaned back on my sofa, exhaling slowly. "Deborah, I've tried for years not to interfere in how you and your mother handle your relationship, but after this," he shook his head, "you're not wrong. You're not overreacting." She crossed a line. He hesitated then, as if choosing his words with care. "There's something you should know." My stomach tightened. "What?" Dad rubbed his temples, the lines around his eyes deepening. "Your mother. She wasn't always like this with you. But there were signs. I didn't think they'd ever become something this extreme." I frowned. "Signs of what?" He sighed. "When your mother was your age, high school, college, she was the center of everything. Popular, charismatic. Everyone knew her. Everyone wanted to be her friend. Cheer captain, homecoming queen, all of it." I blinked, picturing her in ways I'd never imagined. It made a strange kind of sense, her natural confidence, her effortless presence. "And her stepdaughter," Dad continued gently, "is almost a mirror of who she used to be." I swallowed hard. "So she likes her because the girl reminds her of herself." "And because you don't," Dad added softly, not unkindly. My chest tightened. I had always been quieter, more introverted, more likely to spend Friday nights reading or gaming instead of going to parties. I'd never wanted the spotlight. I'd never been the girl everyone gravitated toward. "Your mother. She struggles with things she doesn't understand," he said. "You were different from her, and differences scare her more than she'll ever admit." I closed my eyes, a deep ache spreading through me. Not the sharp sting of betrayal, but a hollow, sinking sadness. A grief for something I never truly had, a mother who wanted to know me instead of molding me. "She chose her," I whispered. "No," Dad said firmly. "She chose what makes her feel important. That's not the same thing." He paused, then added, "I'm blocking her too. Not because of you, although I support you completely, but because she needs consequences for what she did. And because I'm not letting anyone talk to my daughter the way she talked to you." The solidarity in his voice made tears burn behind my eyes. I looked away, blinking quickly, not wanting to unravel in front of him. But he knew. He always knew. The days that followed felt different. Lighter in some ways, heavier in others. I moved through my routines like someone relearning how to navigate their own life. Sometimes I caught myself reaching for my phone to text her out of habit, only to remember she wasn't someone I could lean on anymore. And each time the reality hit a little less sharply. But somewhere inside me, where the sting of her rejection still lingered, something else began to grow. A quiet space, a breath, a beginning. There were moments, small ones, where I caught myself imagining a future without her at the edges of every milestone. Maybe one with new people, new traditions, new warmth. Something in my life was changing, shifting, realigning. I didn't know what shape it would take yet, but for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel afraid of it. If anything, I felt a strange, cautious hope. The weeks that followed settled into a quiet rhythm, the kind that feels almost like healing, even when you're not consciously trying to heal. I kept my space clean, lit candles, and the evenings cooked meals that actually tasted good. I let myself breathe again without feeling guilty for it. The house felt different, still too big for one person, still echoing sometimes, but it felt safe again, mine again. On the morning of our 3rd anniversary, my boyfriend texted me, "Wear something you feel beautiful in. Pick you up at 7. That was all. I expected dinner, maybe a movie, something low-key, simple, our style. But when he opened the door to his house, warm yellow light spilled out along with the sound of laughter. My friends were there, his friends, a few coworkers, people who had quietly supported me over the past few weeks, even if they didn't know the whole story. There were decorations not extravagant but thoughtful, like he'd spent hours thinking about what would make me smile. I stood there stunned. A party, a real celebration, but not the kind that destroyed things, the kind that rebuilt them. He came up behind me, slipped his arms around my waist, and whispered, "Surprise." And in that moment, something in me loosened. A knot I'd been holding since the night my mother handed me those keys seemed to finally release. Later in the evening, when the lights dimmed slightly and music softened, I brought out his anniversary gift. The rare collector's edition game, the one I'd nearly driven myself insane trying to get. He lit up instantly, eyes wide, laughing in disbelief. "You didn't," he said. "Deborah, this is insane." "I did," I answered, smiling, for real this time. "Happy anniversary." He hugged me tightly, burying his face into my shoulder, and for a moment the chaos of the past month faded into something distant. But then he reached into his pocket. When he pulled out a small velvet box, my breath caught. No speech, no dramatic build-up, just his hand shaking slightly as he opened it, revealing the ring. "I wanted to do this in a moment where you felt loved," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion, not alone, not scared, not like you had to earn anything. Just loved. "Deborah, will you marry me?" Everything inside me went quiet. Not empty quiet, like the world was holding its breath. I didn't cry. Not at first. I think I was too shocked by the sudden, overwhelming swell of warmth. But when I said yes, when his face broke into the widest smile I'd ever seen, I felt tears slip down my cheeks, unbidden and uncontested. The room erupted in cheers. People hugged us, clapped us on the back, celebrated with overflowing joy. It was everything a milestone should have felt like. And then came the part that felt like the universe testing me. Without telling me, he had invited my mother. He told me later he wanted to give her a chance to be part of something important, to show me she could show up. I didn't fault him for hoping, but her response carved another line in me I didn't know I had. She told him I was no longer her daughter, that she had no interest in supporting my life choices, that she didn't want to celebrate someone who betrays her own family. He didn't tell me that night. He kept the pain of her words to himself, refusing to let it shadow the joy of the moment. I only found out the next morning, curled under his arm, staring at the ring glittering on my finger. I didn't cry when he told me. I didn't shake. I didn't fall apart. I just exhaled. Slow, long, finally. Because I realized something stunningly simple. Her absence did not ruin anything. It didn't poison the night. It didn't rot the happiness I felt. It didn't change the warmth of the people who celebrated me, who chose me, who loved me without conditions or comparison. Her absence only proved what I had been resisting. I didn't lose a mother. I lost someone who never wanted to know me, and I gained everything I needed without her. Dad cried when I told him we were engaged, real tears, the kind he tried to brush away like they were embarrassing. My fiancé kissed my hand every time he saw me staring at the ring, as if anchoring me back to something secure and permanent. My friends texted me nonstop demanding proposal details and celebration plans. My house, my own house, felt ready for something new. A new chapter, a new Christmas, a new family built not from blood, but from choice. I imagined the living room decorated with warm lights, Dad carving a turkey in the kitchen, my fiancé's arm around me as snow fell outside. I imagined laughter, comfort, peace. A holiday with no screaming, no guilt, no favoritism, no measuring myself against someone else's shadow. Just belonging. And maybe someday I'll think about my mother without that familiar sting. Maybe someday I'll accept who she is without mourning who she wasn't. But right now, I don't owe her healing or forgiveness or access to this life I'm building. I only owe myself the courage to move forward. And I have that now.